I'm April. I am a singer-songwriter and music teacher, and today, as it is the new year, I thought it would be really fun to kind of go over some of my favorite songwriting methods, and hopefully it'll help you get started with your New Year's resolution to write more songs, or it'll just give you a nice refresher on some of the different options you can try. So I'm going to get started with my favorite method of songwriting to use with my students. I think it is the best for beginners or for people who tend to get stuck halfway through a song. And that method is, of course, outlining. I think outlining is super useful because it allows us to basically make a plan for what's going to happen in our song. And for those of you who are a little bit more analytical or feel the need to kind of plan things ahead of time, this method is just totally foolproof. So the way we use this method is we start with what is called an outline. And of course, an outline in songwriting works exactly the same way that an outline would work when you're writing like an essay for English class. So you're gonna start with a list of all of the different parts of a song and kind of put them in order of what you'd like them to look like in your song. So a typical pop song structure would be like a verse, chorus, bridge, chorus type of deal. Though you might also see a verse refrain, you might see a verse chorus form that has a pre-chorus. You might want to add a solo or an intro. There are post-choruses. There are all of these different wonderful types of song sections. So really you can kind of customize this to whatever you like to write. And if you need help with choosing a song form or you just want to get started without thinking about it too hard, you can check out my outline in the description below. Once you have a list of all of the different song sections you'd like to include, you can get started by writing just a one-ish sentence long description of what's going to be in that section. So I like to start with the chorus, which really is just going to be whatever the main idea of your song is going to be. So for instance, if you're writing a love song, your main idea can be, I love you. Or if you're writing a song about loss, it can be, I miss you. Now all you have to do is every time it says chorus or refrain in your outline, you're just gonna write, I love you, I miss you, whatever you decided on as your main idea. The main idea can also be the moral of the story or whatever you'd like the listener to take away. So for instance, in the song The Greatest Love of All, the main idea is just self-love is the greatest love. Once you have a good idea for your chorus and something that you know you want to write about, you can start by fleshing out your verses. Now verses are just the part of the song where you tell your story. If your song was about missing someone, the verses are going to be the section where you expand on that. So you could maybe list 3 things that you used to do with that person. Or if the main idea was I love you, you could maybe write 3 things that you love about that person, or 3 examples of why you love that person, 3 moments that you maybe spent together, or 3 times when they were there for you and your relationship felt special. You can also use your verses to tell a story in beginning, middle, and end. So for instance, if the beginning of the story was we met, the middle of the story was we fell in love, and the end of the story was you broke my heart, that would be a really good opportunity to really use that song structure to your advantage. If your 3 verse ideas don't necessarily feel like they follow a specific order, you can always stack them by intensity. So start with the least intense thing, and then just get more intense as the story goes. So if your main idea is about why you love your mother, you could maybe say, she brought me into this world. She nurtured me. And then maybe she was always there at my theater productions. Or something along those lines. Now for me, while it was very important that my mother did in fact come to all of my theater productions, I would probably say that that's the least intense of those examples. So I would put that as my verse 1, because it can just open the story on something that's nice and something that's relevant, but not something that's going to build the intensity, because we want it to kind of feel like a roller coaster going up. Once you have your 3 verse ideas and your chorus, you can choose to use a pre-chorus or not to use a pre-chorus, and that's totally up to you. I think for me personally, I tend to write the pre-chorus after everything else, because often it'll slot right in or it just won't. If you feel like your verse and chorus sound really good next to each other, there is absolutely no need for a pre-chorus. But if you feel like they don't really quite click, or there needs to be something in the middle to kind of get the ideas to line up, that's when I would come up with a really awesome pre-chorus. The last song section that I'm gonna go over is the bridge. And the bridge is really just the section of the song that feels the most intense. So that's that part of the song kind of toward the end where everything felt like it built and built and built throughout the whole song. And now we've got this epic, climactic kind of ending right before we go back into our last chorus. The bridge is a really great opportunity to get a new perspective, but I often think of it as the pinnacle of the song. So I think this is a great opportunity to either intensely summarize everything that you've just talked about. So if you've been talking about I missed you the entire song, this is a great opportunity to say like, I miss you so much and I don't know if I can go on without you. And another idea is to just go the opposite direction. So this can be the moment where you can give us a plot twist or give us kind of a twist on whatever you've been talking about. So if your entire song was about I miss you, this is a good opportunity to say, I miss you, but I'm gonna get over it and I'm gonna move on and I'm gonna be okay. So those are all the song sections I'm gonna go over. There are obviously tons of other things you can add or take away, so feel free to kind of customize it to whatever you enjoy in a song. Once you have that full outline, you have a beautiful roadmap to the rest of the songwriting process, so you can just expand all of those sections into 4 lines, or sometimes 8 lines if you want to get really fancy. And from there, add chords, add a melody, do the whole thing, and have fun in the process, because now you don't have to get stressed about not knowing where you're going to go next. The second songwriting method that we're going to talk about today is the zooming out method, which I talk about all the time because I came up with it and I'm obsessed with it. So let's talk about that now. So the idea here is to start off with a really, really common songwriting exercise, which is of course the sense description. Pat Pattison talks a lot about sense description in his books, and so if you've never read any of Pat Pattison's books, I would definitely recommend them. They're fantastic. But the idea is that you're going to start off with a very small object. So that can be a key or a coffee cup, or it can be a baseball, or whatever it is that you come up with in the moment. Just pick any small object. If this is your very first song, or you're just not used to doing sense description exercises, I think the best starting point might be with your favorite fruit. And all you're gonna do is, on a piece of paper, just bullet point things about that object. But specifically, I want you to talk about the senses. So your 5 senses, obviously, are smell, sight, taste, touch, and sound. And all you're gonna do is detail those things for your object. So for instance, my favorite fruit is a lemon. Weird, I know. So what I would do is I would start by saying, it looks yellow, it looks bright. Maybe there's a green leaf coming off of the end, or maybe I'm seeing a bruise on the outside of it. I could also say maybe it's really little or it's really big. But then once I have a fair number of visual things about that lemon, I'm gonna go on to my next sense. So for instance, it smells bright and it smells fresh. It reminds me of the hand soap at my mother's house. Maybe your favorite fruit is an orange and it reminds you of a beautiful orange grove that you went to as a kid. Or maybe that smell reminds you of drinking orange juice. No matter what object you use or whatever your favorite fruit is, you can just keep going with this exercise until you have all of those bullet points filled. There are also lots of other senses that you can add. For instance, you can add the weight or the movement of something, which I think is totally optional. I think that's up to you, but it definitely does add to the overall story of your object. So now, since we want to turn this into an actual song, what we're going to do is we're going to take that object and we're going to zoom out. And so the next thing we're going to zoom out into is going to be the room that our object is in. So for instance, if your object is in your bedroom, you're going to be describing your bedroom using all of your senses. Or if you're in the kitchen, same deal. Or if you are in that beautiful orange grove, same idea. So you're going to go through and describe, this is what the trees look like, this is what the flowers smell like, this is what the cleaning products in the kitchen taste like. Don't eat cleaning products. Now, once you've done that exercise, you can zoom out yet again, and this time we're zooming out into the general emotion of the room. So what you're going to do is maybe list any characters who are in the room. You're going to list kind of the general vibe and feeling that's happening in that room. Maybe 2 people are sitting in a room and they're angry at each other, or maybe they've just had their first kiss. Maybe someone's sitting alone and feels lonely, or maybe someone's sitting alone and feels really relieved that people aren't bugging them. Now, no matter what you choose, this is the moment you're going to actually loop back around to your object. So for instance, if your story is going to be about someone who is feeling alone and you chose a lemon, what do those two things have in common? Lemons are bitter, they're sour. Maybe you're taking lemons and turning them into lemonade. Or maybe you're giving a twist to the idea of yellow being happy. Once you have that big, full, beautiful story, you can just go ahead and write your song however you please. But I think it's a fantastic way to flesh out your story ahead of time so that you don't have to worry about finding meaning in the words you're saying or coming up with a full story. Songwriting method number 3 is going to be starting with the chords. Now you can either do this with an instrument or you can do this with a DAW, but however you decide to go for it, I think starting with chords is a great method for starting. Now if you are starting with the chords, there is absolutely nothing wrong with using a piano roll on a DAW, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with using a chord generator website. I think there are a ton of great ways to come up with chords, but just know that there is no such thing as cheating when it comes to chords. You can use that 4-chord progression that shows up in every pop song. It shows up in every pop song for a reason. But you also don't have to feel like you have to stick to that 4-chord progression. You can go crazy here, play around with the modes, go ahead and play some sus chords, go ahead and play around with chord extensions. There are absolutely no limits when it comes to chords, and that's kind of what's really fun about them. If this is your first song, or if maybe you don't play an instrument or are just learning an instrument, you don't have to go too crazy with this. You can actually start super simply. I'm not going to go too deep into this because I have made a couple of other videos about it, but if this is your first song or if you are just learning an instrument or haven't learned an instrument, here is my video about writing a song if you don't play an instrument. When it comes to chords, I would start with 3 or 4 chords per section. Usually 4 is kind of the standard, and then just experiment with which chords sound good to you. Once you have a chord progression that you really love, you can go ahead and write a melody and lyrics together. You can write the melody first, you can write the lyrics first, but no matter which way you choose to do it, the number one thing I want you to focus on is prosody. So prosody is just what happens when form meets content. And in other words, it's making sure that your lyrics match with your melody and chords. So if you're writing a song about heartbreak, you don't necessarily want it to sound like the happiest song in the world with major chords bouncing up and down and going crazy. But if you do want to write a really happy song, sometimes it can feel a little weird to have slow, soft, minor chords. Now keep in mind, of course, that different cultures have different associations with the different types of chords. And also keep in mind that individual people have different associations with different chords. You can also intentionally use that kind of juxtaposition in order to create a song that maybe sounds sad but is actually happy, or a song that is happy but sounds sad. The last songwriting method that we're going to talk about today is starting with the melody. Now this can be one of the best ways to start if you don't play an instrument, because if you don't play an instrument, you still have your voice, which you can use with your voice memos on your phone, or you can go ahead and just sort of sing stuff and see what you remember, see what you like. But when you start with a melody, it can often be kind of hard to fit the lyrics in where you want them, or to kind of fit it in with the specific chords that you're wanting to play. And it can sometimes be kind of tricky to come up with chords for your melody. I will put a video right there for anyone who wants to learn about putting chords to their melody. Now, I personally really enjoy starting from a melody, and the reason is that it lets you kind of explore a whole range of different things. When you're starting with a melody, one of the best things you can do is start with a scale. So for those of you who are brand new to music theory, a scale is basically those do-re-mi's that you might remember from The Sound of Music, and they are essentially the building blocks of music. A good place to start would be with a major scale. So that would sound like this. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And then backwards, do, ti, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. Now, if you wanted something a little bit sadder or something a little spookier, you could maybe start with a minor scale. So that would sound like this. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, te, do. Do, te, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. Now, if this is totally confusing for you or you are brand new to this, just use the white notes on the piano. And if you want it to sound happy, start on a C. If you want it to sound sad, start on an A. And if you want it to sound somewhere in between, you can start on any of the other notes and it'll kind of create a different sort of sound. But it's all about the specific sounds that you like. Now, if you're coming up with a melody first, you can either pick a note and then just hum something that sounds pretty, or you can just play around by kind of hitting all of the different notes on the piano or going ahead and playing with that piano roll on your DAW. And any of those options are valid and great, and you're gonna have a lot of fun with the process of coming up with a melody. But if you decide to use that scale, what you can do is just start by playing those notes out of order and then seeing where you end up. I like to use a mix of steps, skips, and maybe the occasional jump when I'm creating a melody. So for instance, a step would be if I'm playing every note right next to each other. A skip would be if I'm skipping a note in between. And a jump would be anything else. So mix it up, use some different options, and kind of just have fun playing around. Keep in mind also that melodies are all about repetition. So if you've written something you really like and think is really pretty, what you can then do is just repeat that melody and maybe change something little at the end. Think of melodies as being a call and a response, or a question and an answer. And that can kind of help you to place that melody in your head and just come up with things that you think sound nice going from one little melody to the next. Also keep in mind that whoever is singing this is going to need to breathe. So please, for the sake of me and singers everywhere, add breaths into your melody. Now, if you have a chord progression and you're trying to come up with a melody for that chord progression, a good idea would be to start with the notes that are already in each of those chords. And then from there, just start building your melodies out. So for instance, if my first chord is a C, what I might do is just play the notes in that specific chord, C, E, G, and then come up with a melody that kind of uses those notes and some of the notes around it. So those were 4 different ways to write a song. I hope you found them helpful. I hope this video helps to kick off your new year with some beautiful, lovely songs. Please do let me know in the comments below if you plan to write more songs as your New Year's resolution, if you've been writing a lot of songs since the start of the new year, if this is your first ever song, or if you're just trying to break out of a big long dry spell. Just let me know in the comments where you're at, how you're feeling, and of course while you're at it, leave a like, subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this one. Check out my new album, which dropped on the 1st. I'm really excited about it. It's called Mountainview. There is a link in the description where you can check it out. And ring that cute little bell to be notified the next time I post. I hope you all have a beautiful 2021.